Yes.
Sorry, no waters.
There's extra waters in that. We're going to be starting the program in a few minutes. I would encourage anyone sitting towards the back to possibly move forward. We are going to be showing slides on the screen that have numbers on them, and the numbers are kind of small. So if you want to see the details, you may want to move a little bit closer. Thank you. All right, if I can ask everybody to get seated so we can start the program. Good evening and welcome to the Skokie Election District Mapping Seminar. My name is Meredith Joya and I am the Communications Manager for the Village of Skokie. First off, I would like to thank all of you for coming tonight. It's really wonderful to see so many people invested in the future of the village and wanting to spend an evening here learning about district mapping. To let you know, the program is being streamed live on YouTube. So if you find any portion of tonight's presentation particularly compelling or confusing, you can watch it on our YouTube channel after the event. In addition, all of the presentation slides will be available on our website at skokie.org/referendums. We will also have copies of the maps that are in the slides on there as well. So to walk you through how the program is going to progress, we will first hear a presentation from our panel of experts who are going to give us an overview of the laws that govern district mapping, and then also share some Skokie-specific demographics and facts that need to be considered when you're mapping out a district. And then after the presentation, we will open up the floor for the public to give their input and ideas. So to begin the presentation, let me introduce our experts. First, we have Jason Geisinger, who is an attorney with Klein, Thorpe, and Jenkins, which is the legal firm assisting the village in implementing the referendums in compliance with state election law. Geisinger's practice focuses on areas that include municipal law and election law, and he is a regular speaker and author on issues of legal concern to local government in Illinois. Next is Peter Kretikos, the village's mapping consultant, who brings to Skokie more than 40 years of experience in districting and redistricting, and most recently worked with the Cook County Board of Commissions to update the county's 2021 district map. And then finally, a man who needs no introduction, Village Manager John Lockerbie. As it is the responsibility of the village to implement these referendums, Manager Lockerbie has been overseeing the process since the referendums were passed in November. And with that, I'd like to invite my Manager Lockerbie to begin the presentation.
Thank you very much, Meredith. And good evening, everyone. Welcome to the initial public meeting for implementing the 3 referendums that were approved at the last election in November. I'm John Lockerbie, the village manager. These were citizen-initiated binding referendums. Once the referendums were approved, the village became responsible for instituting the changes to the village's electoral process. The mayor and village board want this to be a process that is completed professionally and above board and encourage information sessions with the public. They delegated the responsibility to the village manager for overseeing the project. Recognizing both the importance of implementing the 3 referendums and the fact that they need to be completed in accordance with applicable law, the village first conducted research to gain an understanding of the experiences of other towns and the process that would be involved in implementation. We then developed a scope of services and conducted an open solicitation process for the required professional services. This process resulted in the village assembling the team, some of which you have already met this evening. In addition, the team also includes Scott Euler, a second attorney from Klein, Thorpe, and Jenkins, as well as some staff members from the village, including those that are with us this evening, Nick Wyatt, the assistant village manager, who is standing in the back of the room, Alex Franz, our management analyst, Patrick Dignan, our Director of Communications and Community Engagement, as well as Mike Alexic, our Assistant Finance Director. Tonight, yes, thank you for letting me know. Tonight, the meeting is focused on the mapping component, but we also wanted to provide the context of the 3 referendums. The reason for the focus on mapping is to provide background and solicit input prior to drafting the 4 districts. Your knowledge of our community is especially valuable in this process. Jason is now going to walk through the 3 referendums and provide an overview of the applicable law.
Probably maybe get this mic here. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, okay, great. All right, thanks everybody. Again, my name is Jason Geisinger. I'm an attorney with Kleinthorpe and Jenkins. And it's really nice to be here speaking with you all this evening on legislative districting. And before we get into some of the law regarding legislative districting, I'm going to talk a little bit about why it is that we are here. So as John indicated previously, in November 2022, there were 3 binding referendum questions that were approved by the voters. The first of those, it requires nonpartisan elections going forward in the Village of Skokie. What this means is that previously in the village, members of the community wanting to run for office could run as part of a political party. Under a nonpartisan form of government, that is not permitted and will not be permitted in the village beginning with the 2025 consolidated election. The second referendum question that passed calls for biennial elections for Skokie offices. Currently and previously in the village, the members of the community only went to the polls once every 4 years to elect all of their local elected officials. Under this new system that's going to be implemented, the members of the community will come to the polls and vote once every 2 years as opposed to once every 4 years. And finally, the primary reason for being here tonight was a referendum question that called for a hybrid system of electing village trustees. Currently, all 6 village trustees are elected at large by the community. Under the new system, there is going to be 4 new districts that are going to be created and 1 village trustee from each of those districts. And there will also be 2 at-large districts, which will continue to be elected from the village as a whole. Now, in terms of the law that we're going to be using to draw these maps, the laws come from both state and federal law. And on the federal side, the first and perhaps most important legal principle is the 1 person, 1 vote principle. This principle comes from a series of United States Supreme Court cases in the 1960s, and it was designed to create fair representation amongst the voting public in the United States. Prior to these decisions, it was a strategy of people who were drawing maps, if they wanted to do it to their own advantage, to do so in a way where you would have some very large districts and very small districts. So people under that system didn't have their votes were not weighted proportionately. So this 1 person, 1 vote principle seeks to combat against that. And what that means for drawing the maps here is that we need to have 4 districts that are of essentially equal population. And you can see up here on this slide, we have the 2020 census data that shows 67,824 residents of the Village of Skokie. So what we would be looking to do with 4 equal districts would be having 16,956 people in each of those districts. Of course, that can't be done in almost every case. I've never seen exactly equal populations because of practicalities and drawing maps and things of that nature. So the law does allow a 10% population differential between the most populous district and the least populous district. And you'll see what that differential, you can see what that differential is here up on the slide. And we're going to be looking at not having the largest district be any greater than 697 people than the smallest district. Now, also, the other source of federal law that's significant in this process is the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This was one of the most significant pieces of civil rights legislation that was enacted in the United States, and it sought to remedy and prevent racial disparities in the American voting system. It prohibits any voting practice or procedure that has a discriminatory result. What this means for purposes of legislative drafting is that this statute provides for racial fairness in elections by prohibiting the creation of legislative districts that would dilute the vote of a protected minority voting group. In Illinois, you'll see that case law has recognized the Black and African and American communities, as well as the Latino and Hispanic communities as protected minorities under the Voting Rights Act. As I said, vote dilution, that's the thing that the act seeks to prevent. And there's a two-factor test that you look at for voter dilution. The first is the size and the geographical compactness of the minority group, and also whether the group is politically cohesive. Two strategies or things that happen in legislative mapping that have the impact of creating minority group voter dilution is called one is fracturing, the other is packing. And fracturing is a situation if you have a cohesive minority voting group in a particular area of a legislative district. Fracturing that would be drawing the district that breaks them in half, or could break them into multiple different districts. And packing is kind of the opposite of that, and that's a situation where you draw the maps in such a way that all of the minority groups are in one particular district, or one particular minority group is in one district, instead of giving them populations in different voting districts. So those are two things that it cannot be done, in the law it absolutely prohibits when drawing legislative maps. And then the use of voting age population data, that's a metric that can be used in drawing legislative maps. And Peter will talk about that in a little bit. Now, under Illinois law, the two primary requirements is that the legislative districts be contiguous. And that means that all or parts of the district must touch each other and be encompassed within a single common boundary. It prohibits, like what you'll see is like strip connections of districts, kind of how O'Hare Airport is connected to the city of Chicago. We don't want to draw legislative districts that look like that. Also, we want to make them as nearly compact as we possibly can, which means that they just have to be regularly shaped. I'm sorry?
It stopped.
Yeah. Sure. I'm almost done, but I can take the hat now. How's this? Sorry about that. All right, so we want the districts to be as compact as possible, which means we don't want legislative districts that can constitute gerrymandering. You don't want it looking like, strange oblong shapes just to reach a particular result. The law requires the districts to be as compact as practical. And I spoke earlier about impermissible ways to district under the Voting Rights Act, which deals with fracturing and packing. And the law does provide these other mechanisms for advancing the interests of minority groups. And some of these strategies that can be used are the creation of crossover districts, where a minority voting group can join with the majority group to select their preferred candidate. Coalition districts, where minority groups form coalitions within the district to elect their preferred candidates, and also influence districts, where the minority population is such that they can influence the result of a particular election. Now, some other principles under the law that we'll be taking into consideration in drawing the maps. One is the boundaries of other political subdivisions. The school districts come to mind for the Village of Skokie. Also, preserving communities of shared interest is something that we would take into consideration. And the last point here is more of a redistricting concept, but going forward, when we come back and redistrict in 2030, when we have a new census, one of the things we'll be looking at is maintaining the core populations of the prior districts. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Peter, who's going to be talking about the data and the facts that we're going to be looking at when we're creating these new legislative districts.
Thank you. Oh, and thank you all for coming out tonight on a rainy night. I was telling that I've been trying that. It's the largest product. So as Jason said, I'm going to just kind of walk you through some ideas about how to think about this case. The first thing is you got to keep that number in mind. 1796 is the ideal population. You're only allowed a very good 16,000. Sorry. So you got to make sure that you stay within that with a plus or minus 5% at the bottom. Beyond that, you start getting into trouble with respect to one person, one vote. And as you look at maps, some of the odd shapes in some of the districts, I won't cite exactly which ones, but you've seen some of the other maps, is in part because of that population equal between the groups. It's not the entire reason, but it does happen. Okay, so this is going to be hard to read in the back, but I just want to give you an idea in terms of some of the census geography. And the most important part is that we work here at the bottom end. We work in terms of blocks, block groups, and tracts. These are geographic areas that are set by the Census Bureau. Now, blocks pretty much conform to what you would consider to be a block in the sense that it's bounded by 4 streets. It happens sometimes you'll see an alley split a block, but more often than not, here in Skokie, I don't think I saw another example of this. It's an area that's bounded by four streets. Some areas will exceed that in the sense that there may be cul-de-sacs and so forth, and they're all within that what's called a block. But that's the basic element, and that's the smallest element that we work with. Block groups is just as the name suggests, they're aggregations of blocks. And finally, census tract is what everything ramps up to in larger configurations. But those are the 3 most important geographies to think about and to appreciate that this is the way we approach the process. Okay. 3 points about, 1 point about the block data itself. The census has a statutory responsibility to keep individual data, the data about each of you, private for decades. So just recently they released the private data, individual data for 1950. And so the census has that obligation. The problem is that when they count, some blocks may have 5 people, may have 10 people. And it's pretty easy to figure out, in the case of, let's say, 5 people or 10 people, who those 10 people are, and what the race, ethnicity, other demographic information, like spoken home, has household, all that information that's collected can be attributed to the individuals. And so what they do is they fuzz the data. And so they will take data from an aggregate group of blocks and will perhaps average them and then redistribute them, or do other sorts of, they have an algorithm which I frankly never gotten into the details of. It doesn't apply to how I approach the work. But what they end up doing is that they redistribute the data amongst these various lines. What that means is that you may look at a block, I may look at a block and say, well, it says 10 people, but there aren't 10 people. 15, 20, 0. We can't do anything about it. We have to take the census data as is, including any demographic information. It all washes out when we start to get into larger configurations like districts, but I've had people try to argue with me and say that the data is wrong. The answer to that is the data, that's what we have to deal with, and that's how we work. So, as Jason said, I'm just going to throw out a few examples of how to, you may want to think about approaching district. These are just examples. But as he noted, for instance, we plotted out, the gray area is Skokie. And the boundaries are the districts that intersect with Skokie. And so, for instance, you see District 73, 73.5, 72, and so forth. What we've done is we've calculated the populations for each of those districts in Skokie. This is Skokie portion of these. Now, going back to the number I was saying in terms of ideal population, no two can will add up to a perfect district. So we may want to try to look at boundaries, and we may borrow boundaries as we move forward in terms of districting. But the closest I came up with, for instance, 73 and 73.5, which gets us about 15,000. So we're a little shy, so we have to borrow from another district if we chose to go to the route. But it is a way that we try to look at how people go to polls, where they identify, do they identify with school districts. In this case, this is helpful in terms of understanding how Skokie clicks and the communities that people identify with in terms of their elementary districts. But it isn't going to be something that we can use in absolute form. This is a hard one to look at, and I'll try to explain it. Just what you need to see is really the patterns. So these are 4 racial ethnic bands. One is showing where Black and African American population exists, where they live in this case the concentrations. So the darkest area is over 20%. Excuse me, 20 people per acre. This is Latino population, again, with the darkest area in this case, because of measurement styles, is over 15. This is Asian population, and this shows the concentration is over 20%. And the darkest area here shows the populations where whites are over 20%.
Your point there is invisible.
All right.
Your point is this.
Okay. So there's right in the center is where we see the Black African American population, the most concentrated, Latino, Asian, and white. The point of this, all I'm trying to show, is that areas where these 4 populations are the most concentrated all overlap. So tells me that Skokie is very integrated. It may not be on a block by block basis, but when you look at it from the standpoint, and I don't know that, sure, but if you look at this, you'll see that the areas where the greatest concentration exists in each of these 4 populations overlap with each other, which my understanding is where you have multifamily dwellings. So it kind of makes sense. But what this also tells me is that from a voting rights perspective, we have 2 protected minorities, African American population and Latino population. And neither population is segregated from the, unto themselves, which would make it very difficult to try to draw a district that attempts to protect either of those two populations. They're integrated, so the way the map is will probably have to be drawn. We're doing some further analysis on this, sure. The way the map has to be drawn is a way that the issue of race and ethnicity with respect to the female population, black population, is one that, from a borderlands perspective, is something that we don't have to look at from drawing areas that are predominantly one population or the other. We'll take questions at the end. This map shows population by age group. And I'm just going to insert this to say that typically we don't look at age when we're drawing a map. But what stands out to me is the picture at the far right, which shows that the northern third, Skokie, runs about a third over 60 in each of across those two tracks. These are the tracks. So it's a bit unusual in the sense that we don't typically see that kind of dominance of an age group in a particular area. I know housing stock a bit in this, so it makes sense because this is includes the area north of Memorial Park, includes the area north of Old Orchard, includes the area west of Old Orchard. It's about church, bottom line of that green. So it may be an issue that in talking to the public and you, the staff, it's something that we like to consider, we may consider, and thinking about communities. And then finally, there's, I think I skipped it, but I'm not going to go back. Only because it's another map now. Here we go, precinct. The county clerk has organized all the precincts. The way they conduct elections is by precinct. And another way to think about how the map might be configured is looking at existing precincts. Problem with precincts is that they often go down main thoroughfares. On the other hand, as a citizen, you know your precinct, you have a sense of what those precinct boundaries are, and your participation in elections are defined by how these precincts are completed. So that's another possibility. Again, all I'm raising is that these are ways in which maps can be configured, drawn, and thought through. What's really important, and this is part of what I think the message that we want to deliver in terms of your participation, is the point that Jason made, which is around communities of interest. Communities of interest are not specifically defined as what they are in the law. It's what people come forward and say, this is a community where we share some common values, share some maybe around a shopping center, maybe around a school, and maybe around anything that draws people together as a community. And it is something that we can take into consideration, but it's something that you have to present. It's the people in the community that says, this is a community of interest, and we would like to see how we can preserve this in some fashion or another. So I'm going to wrap up here, and I'll forward it back to where it's supposed to be.
So we just wanted to kind of outline the process going forward. And so tonight, as we said, as the initial public meeting, we appreciate your interest and participation. And so from the feedback of tonight's tonight's meeting, the 4 districts will be drawn, the map will be drawn. And so at this point, the map has not been drawn. But in addition to the map, we'll be working towards the other 2 referenda. And so the proposed map and the implementation process will be presented at the next meeting on September the 11th. And we will post it on the electoral change page of the website on that Thursday before, that's September 7th. And so after tonight, and as we receive additional comments, those will be incorporated into the proposal, which again will be on the village website, on the electoral change page on September 7th, and then we'll be back in this room, televised on YouTube as well on September 11th. And then following that, we have the November and December timeline, and that will be when the proposal is presented to the village board. And so in November will be the first presentation, and then December will be the second presentation and approval. So forth at the board session. And so that's the process, and we would like to hear from you. And so I'm going to turn this back over to Meredith.
I think I can just use this one. I speak loud enough. Thank you all for that very informative presentation. Next, we are going to open up the floor to hear your input, ideas, and comments. The implementation team is really eager to hear from residents because you all know your neighborhoods and community better than any of us. So please feel free to approach the microphone and share with us any insight you feel that we should know that will assist with the mapping process. Now, to be respectful of everyone's time this evening, each attendee is allotted up to 3 minutes to speak. When you approach the microphone, please start by giving us your name, and then I'll begin timing your comments after that, and I'll hold up a sign to let you know when you have 1 minute and when you have 30 seconds remaining so that you have time to wrap up your comments. Now, as they said, public input is a critical part of this process, and we want to make sure that everyone has their ideas and suggestions heard and considered. So if you're unable to finish your comments tonight, or if something comes to mind after you've spoken, or comes to mind tomorrow or later on in the week, you can submit your input via a short survey available at the QR code located on the screen. Oh, except it went away. Ah, there we go. The QR code located on the screen. In addition, you could send an email to electoralreferendums@skokie.org. And then we also have comment cards and a comment box by the exit if you wish to submit them tonight while they're still fresh on your mind. So I would welcome the first person to approach the mic. Please introduce your name first, and then we'll begin timing.
Very end, I heard a reference to the fact that is that correct? Yeah, ultimately, the village board will be passing ordinance that establishes. Considering the big controversy that set this whole thing in motion, how do we go for find someone sabotage?
In my introductory remarks, I made the comment that this was citizen initiated referendums, and that following them being approved, it's the village's responsibility to implement them. And so the mayor and the board wants the process to be on the up and up, transparent, support the professional implementation. And so the village solicited professional experts in order to join the team. And so that's why Jason and Peter are here. The village went through the solicitation process in order to find professionals with experience and issues. And then
Good evening. My name is Carrie Willian, and I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of the Skokie Alliance for Electoral Reform. We are the grassroots nonpartisan ballot initiative committee that created the pre-referendum questions, obtained the signatures of thousands of Skokie voters, and spread the word throughout Skokie to pass these needed reforms in order to update Skokie's outdated electoral system that has discouraged candidate and voter turnout for decades. And I believe this big turnout tonight on this rainy night is evidence that these reforms are reinvigorating political engagement at Skokie. We are pleased to be here with you this evening to begin this important work of drawing new electoral districts. We want to support this process and we'd be happy to meet with you and to provide you with more information and research. I think one way we could help make this seem more transparent would be to have more citizen involvement in this process. We've been wanting to meet with the attorneys as citizens to practice these to make sure there's clarity. For example, a note of clarification, when you were going over what the pre-referendums do, there was an error in there. It's important to have clarity with all of this. Nonpartisan elections won't mean you can't run a federal party. Anyone can still run a federal party. You're wrong, sir. You're wrong. You can still run as a party. Your party name will not be on the ballot, but any party can still fund you, send out mailers, fax anybody you want. It's just your name, your party name won't be on the ballot. So we need to talk after, please. So first, we would like to know a little bit more about the criteria for running the district. We appreciate your presentation. It clarified a lot for us tonight. But we would hope that these criteria will be posted clearly for the community to see. And given that the intent of these reforms is to increase candidate and voter turnout, to promote fair, transparent, and accountable representation, and to address the long-standing underrepresentation of the South and West parts of Skokie, we ask you to please keep that intent in mind as you draft potential electoral districts. So in addition to what you said about them being compact, contiguous, and equal population, and taking into consideration communities' interest in existing geographic boundaries, we encourage you to draw these districts in a way such that they, one, promote increased numbers of candidates running and residents casting votes in village board elections, two, ensure equitable geographic representation across the village, and three, do not advantage or disadvantage any individual or political party. We also urge the village to please ensure that Skokie residents have ample opportunity to participate in each step of this mapping process. We've heard the timeline here, we understand that. We want to make sure there will be at least a month after that September 11th meeting for the public to provide input for best practices. And if changes are made in response to public comment, we encourage you to have additional time for the public to respond to the revised map again for best practices. We urge the village to go beyond its initial plan for public input and follow the example of other municipalities that are more actively
Thank you.
residents.
For example, Portland, Oregon.
Please give us your name.
Oh, I'm sorry, my name is.
What is your name?
Matt Jarvis, from Skokie Alliance. For example, Portland, Oregon has proposed multiple map options for public input, with various ways provided, including many public hearings, phone line, web form, email, snail mail, and they provided the information in multiple languages. Locally, when School District 65 recently redrew the student assignment map, they used a similar process with many meetings in English and Spanish, multiple proposed maps and methods for providing input. And time for input and revision multiple times. In a place as diverse as Skokie, we encourage the village to solicit input in various ways and languages and propose multiple maps for public consideration. It is critical that we engage our community broadly in this process. The process for drawing these districts is to be transparent and inclusive. In addition, these maps are drawn for our new hybrid system of representation. We would like to reiterate the importance of combining the new reforms of staggered terms and hybrid representation so that the district vacancies are elected in one election, and the at-large positions, the mayor and two at-large trustees, are elected in the other. With this configuration, we can encourage increased voter turnout at all elections, as the positions that will likely be most motivating to voters to turn out are the mayoral position and the local district-based And we can avoid giving certain districts and outsized influence on certain outlier positions because of the likely greater voter turnout in the district when their district-based trustee is on the ballot. In summary, the questions we would like answered tonight are, how will you increase transparency and inclusion in this process? Noting what Sherry mentioned earlier. And then also, what will be the timeline when soliciting on revisions? So you mentioned that there will be a sample map in September, but as far as collecting information and then giving them time to revise through that process after September for a final draft. Thank you very much. We look forward to working together to make every vote matter here. So.
Thank you.
I actually have 2 questions. I don't know if that's legal, but I'm gonna try. I saw on the timeline that maps will be released the Thursday before September 11th meeting. And then they're presented to the board in November. Does that mean that period between, that they will be open for public comment and open to revisions if necessary based on public input?
Would you go back to the
Yeah.
slide?
She's there, she's ahead.
And so the intent of having the month of October, the second half of September and the month of October blank is in order to, it's very hard to anticipate exactly how the process is going to unfold. And so there's flexibility intentionally built into the timeline in order to see how things unfold after September 7th, after September 11th, and before the November presentation to the board. Part of how this timeline is created is that there's always been interest in having the proposal finalized this calendar year in order to give potential candidates or candidates an opportunity to plan accordingly. And so all of those components are reflected in the timeline that you're seeing.
I agree 100%, but it's important to wrap this up this year. I guess I'll make my question simpler. Will you actively be seeking public comment and input on the maps after they are released and before they are effective?
Yes, the intent is to have, we'll see how it goes at the time, but the intent is to have one map, because it's very difficult to find districts that are the right number of.
For sure, I'm just saying, like, this one map comes out with 4 districts.
And we'll have.
Are you gonna seek public input
Absolutely.
on, okay. I'm sorry, I was saying maps, but districts in a map.
Yes, I
I
understand.
mean, I look to see 10, but no, I'm not. And then at that September 11th meeting, it says the implementation plan will be presented. Is that the first time that we can expect to hear the plan for how staggered will be implemented?
Yes, the intent is for that meeting to be more both about mapping, but also using the other 2 referendums.
And then there will be active seeking of public comment based on that, like, so that we can reiterate to you that we think that the district positions should be run at the same time and the at-large positions should be run in the off-election. Thank you.
Just to let everybody know, I believe the plan is to hold the September 11th meeting similar to what we're doing tonight. So there will be a presentation of the map and the implementation plan, and then we are going to open it up to public comments. So we are releasing the map and the plan on the Thursday before so that everyone has a chance to review it, get their public comments ready, and then attend the September 11th meeting. Give us your comments there, and then we're going to maintain the email address for any written comments that would like to be submitted afterwards as well. So we will be soliciting public comments after we release those. Right.
Hi, Noelle Sullivan. I just wanted to first express thanks for all of the work that's being done on this. It's been complex and tricky. And along those lines, I am just curious about is the presentation is demonstrating that it's looking at districting in terms of residents based on the census, which I understand phase of data, so no questions there. But one of the things that I am a bit curious about in a community like Skokie, where we have a large proportion of people who are not voter eligible because they are immigrants and they haven't elected to or been eligible to become voting citizens yet. So how does the team think about that in terms of representation in the ways that the districts are being divided up? I think it's a question that we have used for the public to understand.
So, you have to go by the census. You have another set of data that's part of that PL9 program, PL file that was referenced, that shows the voting age population. So we can tease out, for instance, what voting age population would be for districts. There are survey data that's not part of the census data that tells us about citizenship. Recall there was a big fight where the Trump administration wanted to include citizenship on the census. It's not, but it is collected in American Community Survey. So we could potentially look at citizen data, but it doesn't, again, survey, it's not hard to get a sense about that, but it doesn't influence the districts itself. So I can tell you what I can record, what potential composition is based on some of the survey data. But it doesn't, but I still have to stick with one person, one vote configuration in terms of the design. So we'll have an understanding, but it doesn't make a difference in terms of the actual.
Couple questions. When we see the presentation tonight, we see the 4 districts that were, showing up on the presentation. Are they going to be called wards where there will be aldermen and alderwomen where the residents will then talk to them if they have any issues? And then the second question I have is, I had heard before the referendum was actually voted upon, the biggest comment I heard in opposition to it was that if this plan would go through, each district or ward would then have to fight for resources for whatever issues they have in their area. For example, resurfacing the streets, environmental issues with alleys that have rat issues or something like that. So that's a big concern for me, that if all of a sudden I call village into question, now under this new idea or concept, that what am I going to be told? Well, the budget is X dollars and we can only do part of the work, for example. So it's a big concern about that.
You were hoodwinked. Sorry.
Those were comments I read from a bunch of different media sources, and I'm asking a legitimate question about this.
No, you are, but the village would still
Excuse me,
be run.
excuse me. I would ask that if you are not at the microphone, if you can please keep your comments to yourself.
Okay, so when a village, such as the Village of Skokie, divides up into districts, and we have call the representatives alder people, we call the representatives trustees from districts. So we'll maintain districts. Also, the referendum question, does it all change the way that the village is going to go through its budget appropriation process? It doesn't change any of that. So in that regard,
Thank you.
My name is Diana Rosalie, and I had just about one question about the trustees and the position, the mayor and the at-large. Is it going to be a split of 2 and 4 years? Or is it all 4 years? It's not very clear. Are we not sure yet?
yeah, so the way it's going to have to work is that some of the trustees, the trustees that are at large, the trustees who are elected by district, are going to have to run in 2025 for a 2-year term. And the others will run for a 4-year term, and then after that, the standard election cycle will pick back up. But in terms of how we're implementing what standard actually means, that's still under review, and that's something that we're going to roll out in September
according to the schedule.
Okay, so it's not clear yet if there'll be any 2/4s, I'm sure.
No, there's gonna be 4.
They're all.
There's gonna be 4 districts,
No,
and
they're
there's
all
gonna
being
be 1
the-
trustee elected from each district, and there's gonna be 2 at large. That's where everybody's gonna go on the election cycle. That's something that's still.
Let me clarify, maybe. So in order to get the first election in 2025, some individuals will have to have a 2-year term, because that will set us up for the first election in 2027. In the past, we've only had elections for the 4 year. And so the only way to get us to the staggered terms is for some of the elected officials to have a 2-year term initially at the 2025 election.
So after 2027, it'll all be 4 years from there on out. Sure.
Correct.
Perfect.
Can you give us your name, please?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
You mentioned that community trust is a consideration, and I'm very concerned about my community trust being split up. It's spread out among Devonshire and Tidbridge and your area.
Thank you.
Could you repeat the question? I couldn't hear the back. Maybe you all could summarize it so people in the back can hear.
Basically, the commenter just expressed concern about her community of interest, her religious organizations and her religious community, and that they may get split or disenfranchised. And so she asked that the implementation team just pay attention to that.
Hi, Tim Wilkin. I had a response to your request. There's about 3 blocks, rectangular, very contiguous blocks between Church to the north, Oakton to the south, Skokie Boulevard to the west, and Crawford to the east, that we think should be kept together. They're kind of similar neighborhoods. Happy to expand it west or east, north or south to the number. And then I had a question was, are you prohibited from or allowed to take businesses into account? Like we have Old Orchard Mall, we have the Skokie Hospital, we have the tech center, we have the manufacturing sites on the west side. Would they all be permitted to be grouped into one particular district? Or do is that not a consideration you're allowed to take?
Well, they don't have people,
Right.
so that's,
They don't have people, but they do have political influence.
so the way I look at those areas, what they do in terms of separating populations. And an example is you have the cemetery and Skokie Hospital, I forget what they call it now, North Shore or whatever. And those they can isolate the population. Right. And so it's valid to consider how that population is connected. And it could be that it's better to connect it west because there's other population there. That's where those districts, those where those empty spaces come in play. Do they, or the golf course, for instance. And what I try not to do, it's not always possible. What I try not to do is to create little islands. We have a population of people and they're not connected physically in terms of walking to other neighborhoods. It's not always possible, but it's something that I try to take into consideration in terms of isolation. That's where those non-populated areas play a factor. As far as the business interests are concerned, if somebody, community can come together and say, this area, this shopping district is core to how we live as a neighborhood. That's useful information. But district, but industrial areas, shopping centers and so forth, don't have, real standing in this process.
My concern is like the residents around it might be disenfranchised, like, you know, it does however, so
But it's where they live, it's not where they work.
no, it's who they support, like financially, right? Not physically, but like if I own a manufacturing plant on the west side, live in Evanston, I'm not gonna vote for the person, but I might like try to influence who the district leader.
That's not the election process. It's not something that we worry about.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Howard Swagel. I'm a resident of Skokie and an attorney, and I've been involved in politics for most of my life. I'd like to hear a disclaimer. I think I know the answer, but it might provide some comfort to people, because as you know, there is some level of distrust or cynicism among the community. So the question has to do with voting patterns. As we know, when congressional districts, when the city of Chicago ward maps are drawn, it takes into account how people voted in prior elections. And I believe the data is probably available to show, for example, where Trustee Johnson got his votes, or where the Alliance got his votes in the referendum. I'd like, it probably would be assuring for people to hear that that information, voting patterns, will not be taken into account in drawing these maps, and that the team will not make that kind of data available to the trustees. People can do their own research independently, we can't really stop that. But is this process going to be looking at the kind of data that was on the screen and not looking at actual voting patterns, including the last election?
We don't have those. And I'm not going to get it.
Thank you. I suspect that there was the answer, but we just need to hear that and know.
I am Gail Schechter, I'm also with the Skokie Alliance for Electoral Reform. And I just wanted to underscore giving people the option of several maps. And I have it in front of me here. Portland, Oregon is going through this process right now, this summer as we speak. And they, you can go to portland.gov/transition/district commission/district plan. But they're giving people 3 map options. One is preserving established neighborhood boundaries. The second is prioritizing transit corridors, which is another good idea, I consider. And the third one is keeping much of the central city together. So you gave some ideas about how to carve up the districts here, but I think giving people at least 3 options with the ability to comment on all of them.
Hello, my name is Molly Anderson, and in terms of communities of interest in Franklin, it's a little selfish. So I live in a few streets just south of Maine. Anyone who's driven by that part of Main Street from like Crawford to Lowell knows that it's a bit underdeveloped in terms of how many businesses are actually there. It's sad, that part of the street. And there's been some really great organizations done in that block of blocks around there this last summer. Yeah, sure. It's like on Main, from Crawford to about Lowell, and then like sort of south there to California streets, like down from there to Oakland, and probably north of there too. I didn't actually catch the boundary, but I was
now, there's a woman, the Duke Brigade, she did all the organizing around only about meeting. The summer where she did Friday night activities there, and there was so much interest from the community and excitement and energy around sort of thinking about or thinking about what is possible in that space. And so it's really great for their safety and ability for that conversation to continue as it relates to representation.
Thank you.
Allow all right. But I'll repeat everything saying summarize a little bit not clear on one of the things I would like to know, the legislative criteria which you divide these lines. Well, I know you mentioned relying on the census data, the case law, the census data, like table states and statutes and retro here too. And so questions like, that scope is so integrated, which I'm happy to hear. There are politically cohesive groups that we know about. I mean, common sense, common knowledge of certain groups go a certain way. I like to know how you would divide those people or put them together. I mean, it's in accordance with the table standards. There's a way also gerrymandering based on how political things go. So I'll run up, I don't know what it's, what's the name, not many people like unable to go along those same lines with, you mentioned, elderly people live in a certain area, you know, those people know much more, they have the opportunity, they're more eligible, other families have lots of children, they don't vote, they're kind of in the census. How do we know that's being divided so that it's fair? We spoke about voter age population or voter percentage population things important too. How do you consider those factors? In certain areas, a lot of people vote, but areas they don't. Yeah, we really need to do an election.
Hi, my name is Stephanie. I'm a resident of Skokie. I also want to, I'm a member of the Alliance because I signed petitions. I did want to ask or also put in a word for having options with the maps. I understand it's difficult to draw them, but since this is our first time going through this experience, it would help us to know that, you know, this is what the map looks like if we do it by age. You know, this is what the map looks like if we take into account the school districts and something else. But just so that we know that the map that we do see is the map that is maybe possibly the best map possible. So if at the prior to September 11th meeting, the September 7th meeting earlier, if we could see what 3 or 4 maps look like based on various criteria that you presented, I think that would really be helpful. And I think it would make people believe that whatever map we do come up with is going to be one that has been vetted and looked at and we've seen all the options. That's number one. Number two, I just want to make sure I understand correctly that you said census data is the ruling figure. So that would mean that all of the renters who have moved into these luxury high-rise apartments since 2020, they are not being counted, correct?
Correct.
And then I also would like to hear from the attorney for the village that people's voting habits or voting patterns are not going to be available to them as well.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Can we please have the commenters? You guys have been scooching back and back and back. Can you come all the way up to the front, please?
Can I make a comment about what you might want to expect in September? So all these processes, there's a logic that's developed, a framework that's developed in terms of how the map is conceived. And when you hear the presentation in September, I'll walk you through it. And then that'll give people an opportunity to say, this makes sense, this way or whatever. But at least my experience has been that conversations are most productive when you're presented with an option, the logic and framework behind it, and then you go forward in terms of then how you change, or maybe there's something that's got missing or whatever. That's probably the more constructive way to do it. Options are not all equal. And I think that if you really want to have an engaged conversation on it, it's best to consider what the choices are and then have a discussion.
And my street looks like they were in a connection. There is no two neighbors that are of the same group. And we're all living in peace next to each other. So the areas, I don't see any problem with us making a change. But we just have to understand exactly what you're going to do and what you're trying to explain to us.
Thank you.
Robert Klein, born and raised in Skokie, back after my kids were raised to come back to my community. I came down before that gentleman spoke. Had I not heard her, I probably wouldn't have come down because she voiced my opinion and my preference. I hear you that from your experience drawing maps, that is best served when one option is provided and then you get feedback on that map. And I don't get your experience, but I know that as an informed and concerned voter, my preference would be if I had 3 maps that were presented, drawn out by things like geographic district, by school district, and maybe one other way that they be drawn, where I can see if it's this one, these people that are in these common school districts will have one district representative who can represent the interest of our school district. But this is how the ethnic background is broken up in this community. I said, I hear that your preference is to draw one. I'm just going to put one more community voice in, encouraging you to give us 3 options, explaining if it's this one, here's the advantage, here's the disadvantage, this one, here's the advantage, this is the disadvantage. Thank you for in the context of common interest voting blocks. Thank you.
My name is Mike Castle, President of Skokie. Are you guys going to be addressing terminals at all?
So this session and the following sessions will be focused on the referendums, the citizen-led referendums. So that may be a question that you could ask at a village board meeting, or you could send an email to our village manager, and I'm sure he would be happy to discuss with you at a later date.
Good evening. My name is Charles Sachs. I wanted to reinforce a couple of things that you raised. One is about the nature of the communities, and I think what people are getting to are the institutional, economic, and service relationships, right? So there are different parts of the village that require different kinds of services, or there are different parts of the village that have different characteristics that aren't necessarily incorrect characteristics. Now, I would encourage everybody, I know it's really hard to jam all the data, but I would encourage everybody that can get up to you and important to your neighbors that they have a common interest in the process. The other thing I would say is, I would also reinforce the idea of providing some sort of ability to have some options or create some options, if only to help people understand how difficult and complex this process is. So I think, given the level of distrust that is out there, it's really unfortunate. I think it would be helpful for people to have firsthand experience and try to do it themselves, so that when a map is presented in September, we can intercept or prevent some of that immediate suspicion that's sort of floating around. And I would hope that we don't evolve into that kind of thing. But I would encourage, I think having people have the opportunity to create their own map and realize how difficult it can be would be helpful in bridging that.
Sorry, did you already give comments?
I did.
Has everybody else that asked their comments had their comments heard? Oh, I think there's one here. I also encourage you, if you have a question, you can email it or fill out the survey. No, you're welcome to. You haven't spoken yet, so. Hold on one moment. You good? All right, I'm sorry. Can you start again, please?
Hi, I'm Anita Margaret, and I've been a Skokie resident for the past 12 years or so. And I've seen a lot of patterns. My concern here is, I appreciate the hard work that goes into mapping, but when you say that there will be a map, it's kind of very patriarchal, kind of very old-fashioned to say, we're going to give you one map, and then we're going to give it. But we definitely want 2 or 3 choices. If you want to solve our community well, you need to give us that. And that's all I have to say.
I'm just like a lot of the people saying, one of my delivery questions is how we're going to find second years for standing proposal to separate categories of the district. What factors are being considered for how the village defines that? Those factors are going to be present, roll out. Thank you.
Are there any more comments this evening? Okay, well, thank you all so much for giving us your input and insights. There was some really great information and some great community insight. As a reminder, we welcome the public to submit any additional comments through the short survey found on, let me get this back up. Found on the screen here. There we go. Or via email at electoralreferendums@skokie.org. These comments will be distributed to all of the members of the team who will also be reviewing the recording tonight to make sure that we don't miss anybody's comments. We look forward to seeing all of you at our next program right here on Monday, September 11th at 7 p.m. when we will be presenting a draft election district map and an implementation map or an implementation plan for the other 2 referendums. Thank you and have a good evening.